I do apologize for the pace. My leg isn't quite what it used to be. There we go. There we go. There we go. Let's make this absolutely clear. I don't know who you are or how you found me, but if you try anything, I will kill you. The Dominion pays well, of that I have no doubt. But even a cripple can still hold a blade. Mercenaries come in many guises, so you'll have to forgive me for not taking you at your word. How much did they pay you, Your weight in jewels? The promise of an emissary's position? You're an idiot if you think the Dominion keeps its word. By what right do you invoke rank, stranger? What do you know of war and sacrifice? Fair enough. But if you haven't chosen a side yet, you will soon. No one will be able to escape the coming war. But you seem like an all-right sort. Come, let's grab a seat and I can tell you anything you want. Frankly, my leg has started acting up again. I hope you'll not begrudge a veteran for being careful, but it pays to look out for one's enemies, no matter how long it's been. No, if there's anything I know for certain, it's that the Thalmor never forget those who cross them. Even a sleepy village like Riverwood can attract unwanted attention, if you're not careful. The better question is, what didn't we do? I'm from a small hamlet on the edge of Alakir. Conditions could be worse than Morrowind at times, but it was honest, and life made sense. But there's too much bad blood there now. Too many bad memories. Not just me, but for us all. The Dominion, of course. I was still half a boy at that age. Bull-headed, rash. But I wanted to make a difference. Help the fight against elven supremacy. Thalmor forces were already in Hammerfell before the Great War had officially started, so I began working with a local band across the Alakir. Must have been quite a shock to the elves, to come from lush grasslands and comfort to nothing but desolate wastes as far as the eye can see. Lutes and poetry weren't going to be much help there. There's an old saying that the sands swallow all. We'd use the storms to cover our approach, and strike quickly before they had a chance to react. Most of us were just pulled from local settlements, men and women that had been thrown into warfare with only basic martial training. But we made it work, fought as hard as anything to keep our home. For a time, we had some close calls, and magic is always an unknown in combat, but we joined a battle near the entrance of Montelion. That was chaos if I ever saw it. Soon enough, the locals who had barely learned to hold the right end of a blade were veterans, forged through blood and war. No matter how long it's been. No, even a sleepy village like... I'm from a small hamlet on the... But there's too much bad blood there. The Dominion, I was still... Fell, must have been... Lutes and... There's an old saying that the... Most of... But we made it work. For a time, we had some close calls, and magic is always an unknown in combat, but we fought hard, won a few victories, even joined a battle near the entrance of Montelion. That was chaos if I ever saw it. Soon enough, the locals who had barely learned to hold the right end of a blade were veterans, forged through blood and war. Magic is useful enough in a support role, healing or clearing rubble, but it's wild. One wrong move, one poorly timed shot, and that advantage is wasted. And no amount of spells can stop a sword to the belly. Perhaps I'm just traditional, but I'll take a saber in hand over a spell any day. Good soldiers are worth their weight in gold. Soon enough, we went our separate ways, summoned off to different patrols. The war was gripping all of Tamriel by this point, and even the nobles understood that we couldn't be getting much help from the outside. I had taken a poison arrow during one of the last night raids, and was recovering in Sentinel. A short respite from battle, but a welcomed one. As any soldier can tell you, you take whatever sleep you can get. A lot of wounded in the city, but the guard kept it together and the Dominion off our backs. No, in fact, it was quite the opposite. While recovering and visiting some friends, I was approached by one of the forebearers. The siege had recently been broken, and finally it seemed like the two were going to get their heads out of the sand. She was all blood, respected in the city, and as a joint effort with the Crowns, they organized a war band. By Satakal, it seemed someone got the idea that I should be picked to lead them. It was. Something like that doesn't come around every day. Strictly need to know, armed with the best gear Hammerfell Gold could buy, to strike fear in any who dared to cross into our lands. Of course, I may have been injured, but those few weeks hadn't made me go soft. I was eager to get back into the field and tear the Dominion a new one. We shook hands, and the next day I went to meet them. My people. We met in an old ruin beneath the city, only a few guards on hand. Introductions were made, plans laid out, and we toasted, even as Dominion spells pummeled the gates outside. As for my fellows, well, I could tell we were going to get along just fine. We headed out next morning. Some of the finest men and women I've ever known. War has a tendency to make or break a person, but these ones... I don't know if you fought in a war, traveler. Real war. But if you're lucky, every once in a while, you'll come into contact with someone who just has it. Skill, luck, bit of the gods on their side. I don't know, but each and every one of them was like fury itself in battle. We were the very best Hammerfell had to offer, and we were going to make Thalmor pay their tribute in blood. Our frontal team was led by an enormous Pomarat, gold flecks tinting a mane that had been decades in the making. From what I've heard, they're a rare sight outside of the Khajiit's homeland, but if you saw him fight, you'd understand why I was glad to have him on our side. A lot of great warriors out there, but few would dare risk locking blades with someone like him. More than once, he'd lean forward and sink his fangs into the enemy's face. Rip their throat out, even. The Thalmor never saw it coming. Outside of battle, though, Saja was a quiet one. He was content to keep watch while the rest of us slept, meditating under the moons. Alongside Saja and I, there was an old man, Arlund, disgraced son of one of the minor houses, or some such thing. It didn't seem to matter to him, of course, and certainly not us, but by the sands could that man fight. The art has been lost to history for as long as anyone can remember, but he captured even the smallest fragment of what the Arnshai once were. Sword singers. Never seen anyone before or since handle a blade quite like he could. The damn fool could be grouchy, and wave take you if you interrupted his battle preparations. But he was a dear friend. Not content to live out his days in bed, he fought to the last. With the three of us diving into the thick of it, we had support from all sides to protect our flank. First was the Bosmer, Nilus. I've never been to Valenwood, but the way he held a bow was a work of art. He was small, but he could use that to his advantage, dropping down before a patrol even had a chance to react. Before he'd even touched the ground, 3 arrows would find their mark, but he was always disappointed it couldn't be 4. A bit mad. He loved taking scalps wherever he could, but he moved like water and saved our hides on more than one occasion. Next was Kara, Altimer battle mage. Yes, surprising, no? Fate must have had a sense of humor, sending someone of that caliber into the arms of the Resistance. She could tear any of her kin apart with a spell, and took pleasure in it too. Kara never told us what had brought her from Alinor, but then again, we never asked. She was a firebrand, all right, and gods protect you if you said anything about her heritage or homeland. Of course, she made her allegiance clear from the moment we met, and we never had any reason to doubt her. It was always very matter-of-fact with her. Anything that needed to be done, got done. She'd crawl out of oblivion itself if it'd get her home back. There was Sunvar. I suppose you'd call him our healer, although he personally hated the term. Sure, he knew some restoration magic and could whip up a poultice in the field, but his real skill laid in alchemy. More than once, we'd stop on the road only to find that he wandered off to collect supplies a few leagues back. Oils, poison, explosives, you name it. He had a knack for the stuff, surprising for a Nord. But that was our merry band all around, wasn't it? Finally, there was Tanman, the only one I knew before the war, but I would prefer not to speak of her. We were a family of sorts. Any commander can send new blood to their death. I suppose it was a luxury that I could come to know them at all, trust them. Madness had brought us together, but they were all good people, honest. Even under difficult conditions, there was never a shred of doubt. I've been fortunate to fight alongside people I'd gladly die for, even more so to have walked away from that war at all. It was simple, really. Disrupt Dominion activities wherever we could. At first it was mostly helping protect the roads or the occasional emissary. As the war progressed, we were given more specific tasks. Sabotage and the like. Extinguishing fires, slitting throats as the Thalmor slept, and disappear before the first light. Soon enough, a bit of a legend began to develop. The ghosts of Ban-Garai, deadly wraiths waiting in the reaches of the Alakir. I believe it was the locals that had started the tale. A superstition after patrols no doubt failed to return. It was all nonsense, of course, but as far as we were concerned, anything to shake the Dominion's resolve had its uses. No one, no matter how skilled at tracking, knows the wastes better than my people, and we used that to our advantage. But we referred to ourselves by our own name. Enough time has passed that the name is now only that. But once the Resistance only had to utter it to make captured spies cave. We weren't suited to attrition or open warfare. Thousands and thousands charging at each other in an open plain. Our strengths lay in quick, ruthless attacks. Give everything we had and move out before any scouts nearby showed. A fireball to scatter mounted soldiers, arrows from an elevated point. Then the rest of us moved in to clear up. The Thalmor showed no mercy, so why would we show them any in return? You understand. Good. Hesitation, empathy. All these things are luxuries. Perhaps things could have gone a different way, but we did what we needed to do. Only nobles in their comfortable manners have the time to debate right and wrong. The rest of us just have to live with it. Yes. By then it seemed like all Tamriel had fought to a standstill, but the war just dragged on. Our party was moving around Hammerfell more freely, but we could only be in one place at a time. Let one village burn so you can help protect another. Assault a war party or keep the Thalmor scouts blind. 100 lives or 1,000. Simple choices, but so much more to consider. In any case, that's how it was. One morning, we must have been camped by a small oasis. A rider came charging up. We received letters from Sentinel and other cities before, of course, but this was unexpected. We had been ordered to a small village on the border with Cyrodiil to await members of the Dominion Command passing through. Our contact was a bard of all things, a young Imperial woman by the name of Lavella Dientis. She had been scouting the place out before our arrival. Of course, the The letter was legitimate, and we weren't exactly in a position to refuse with a war going on. Within a couple of days, we'd left the wastes of the Alakir behind us and headed for greener pastures. When we arrived, it was late at night, but that gave us a bit of time to check the place out. Calling it a village was certainly generous. It was more of a loose collection of hovels than anything else. A couple of houses, a run-down farm on the eastern edges, and your typical tavern to pull it together. Nothing out of the ordinary. Next morning, we headed in and visited the tavern. Our illustrious contact was dressed in finery, playing to bleary-eyed peasants. It was all very surreal. Mostly farmers. They appeared to tolerate Diantis' presence as long as she steered clear enough to let them drink in peace. I don't know much about lutes and singing, but she was clearly skilled. Why it was her, someone who'd draw the attention of everyone within 100 leagues as our contact, though, was beyond me. Anyway, despite some misgivings, there was no sign of the Dominion, and the innkeeper's family were decent folk as we settled in. Surprisingly, yes, the letter did turn up something we could use. Diantis told us that a group of emissaries and nobility from Alinor had been traveling with a larger force through the east of Hammerfell. However, the force had split off to move into Skyrim, so these nobles were moving to an encampment in southern Cyrodiil, right into our path. Exactly. And after trudging through the desert, each and every one of us was eager to take that opportunity. Diantis was eager to get it done and leave the place, but we enjoyed some brief respite. Each day we checked the roads, using the woods to stay unseen. Then, well, the time finally came. As I said, the village was no fortress. There were some makeshift stables that could provide cover from arrows, but not a whole lot else. Most of the villagers heeded my warning and left before the Dominion arrived, but the innkeeper was stubborn. Said that he wouldn't move, even if Baal himself was coming. We decided that the best way to draw them out would be to stage an attack in the woods and bring them into the village. Close quarters would be our advantage, and hopefully give us enough time to deal with any spells. Diantis volunteered to play victim of a bandit attack, a little too eagerly, actually, but she was our best hope for getting their attention. All that was left to do was move into position. I waited inside the inn with Saja and Sunvar to play the part of drunken bandits. Getting fat on the latest raid and hopefully enough to get the Dominion's attention. Arlund was dressed as a blind old traveler, nursing a drink on the ground just outside with Nillis on the roof or the stables nearby. Kara had a Justicar's outfit, so would move in with the rest of the group as they approached the village. Tanwyn, well, she wanted to sit by me. Act as the concubine to my dastardly bandit leader. No. Almost from the moment we put it into motion, things began to spin out of control. We had assumed that, once we got their attention, the group would move into the village as one. The ultimate work is single parties. They're not suited to scouting or smaller warbands. They use the Bars Murugajit for that. Numbers weren't a problem provided we could use the surroundings to our advantage. But it was going to be a tough fight. You can imagine what it was like when two Justicars rode in ahead of the group, just as we were getting ready. The only thing we could do, stick to the plan and hope that Diantis would draw in the rest of them. All of us knew the risks, knew what we were in for. But when the two Justicars walked in, no one dared to even breathe. I certainly considered it. But had they managed to get a spell off, it would scatter the rest of the group. Or at the very least, it would blow our disguises trying to deal with the bodies. It wasn't easy, but we had to keep going. The innkeeper could tell something was wrong, but served up the Justicar some drinks. With Satakal's eyes on our side, they'd soon leave or be too drunk to react when we did attack. But those two elves... they decided to come and sit with us instead. I could see that Tanwyn wanted to reach across and throttle them. The Justicars just sat down and struck up a conversation. I remember I kept looking between the door, straining to hear any movement outside, and Saja, who had one hand on their blade. But the Justicars just sat there, ordering more drinks. Maybe they could see we were on edge. Perhaps they just didn't care. Either way, we weren't going anywhere. The innkeeper was ready to move at a moment's notice, but the Altima didn't budge. Those of us inside the inn kept up the act as the Justicars continued to drink and drink. We might have been able to kill them, but it was too much of a risk. Suddenly we heard the bulk of the group moving in. It seemed Diantis had kept her word after all. With no sign of Nilus or Kara, I assumed they were in position and ready to go. The group had arrived, and after a brief pause, a few of the nobles walked in, ordering some wine that the innkeeper had prepared for them especially. They glanced at Saja out of curiosity, but there was no sign they recognized us. They were well and truly drunk by that point, having a jest with Sunvar, who was just staring at them, his jaw clenched. The Dominion relaxed, and I could even hear one of the guards outside talking with Arlund. A Justicar on the table opposite sat down and pulled down her hood, revealing Kara beneath. She was anxious, but there was no way we could talk without drawing unwanted attention. Something was wrong, and we were in deep. It was going to get bloody. The only question was when. Maybe, but it had been a mistake to draw the Altima into the tavern. I, had underestimated what they'd do. Still, we sat there until one of the nobles came shambling over and started flirting with Tanwyn. Clearly they thought we were simple travelers and thought to buy a night with her using gold. I kept up the gruff bandit act, giving him some excuse that she was mine or whatever, but he kept pushing. Tanwyn was so tense I thought she was about to snap, but brushed it off, until the noble leaned forward and put his hand on her thigh. Tanwyn pushed him off of her in disgust, and suddenly, everyone was on their feet. I've been lucky enough to walk away from many situations that would have killed another, but nothing can prepare someone for something like that. Perhaps it was our fault for not moving sooner, for not calling the whole thing off. Perhaps it had been doomed from the start. But it doesn't matter. It was too late. The Thalmor were ready to go, the noble indignant at some dog and his whore for refusing the likes of him. There was no turning back. 3 arrows came tearing through the open windows, hitting the drunks and then the noble, right through the throat. As everyone drew their weapons, I threw my weight forwards, flipping the table onto its side as a bolt of electricity crackled against it. That damn innkeeper had managed to time his throws with Kara, using some cheap bottles to throw on the elves while she followed up with a fireball. As the smell of burnt flesh assailed us, Tanwyn and I leapt out of the nearest window, with Saja, bloody and enraged, not far behind. It was better than I was expecting, worse than I hoped. Arlund stood over 2 soldiers that had been standing guard, but more Thalmor were already running towards us. I could see Nilus on the roof nearby picking off as many as he could, but we were going to be overrun, and there was only one way out. Sunvar stepped out, his hands bloodied from beating one of the drunkard's skulls, with the wounded innkeeper in tow. The heat from behind us was overwhelming, but we drew our weapons to meet the oncoming horde. I wish it had been. There was no way we'd be able to make it to the trees. The horses the Dominion had arrived on were long gone. We stood back to back, but it was not enough. Arlund was the first to fall, an arrow through the shoulder, and then a charger's sword. One of the battle mages collapsed the roof under Nilus, and I heard him cry as the soldiers moved in. Sunvar, he fought through the pain, wielding whatever he could get after losing his weapon. He fell with his kinsman, the innkeeper, teeth clenched in a blinding fury as he pushed his fingers as far as he could into a noble's eye sockets. Tanwyn and I were protecting each other's flanks, our sabers bloodied by elven filth. But no matter how hard we fought, it wasn't enough. One by one, I watched my party die, even as more of the Dominion poured into the village ruins. Saja, right until the end, fought like one of the gods themselves, Warhammer, claws, teeth, whatever that damn Khajiit could do. But one of the Justicars blinded him with a flask, and a group of them managed to overwhelm Kara before she could help. Nor should you. Command is difficult, but we weren't just some garrison out in the wilderness. We were friends, and their deaths are on my hands. Bloodied and near collapsing from exhaustion, I could see some of the Ultima commanders just standing there on the edge of the village, waiting for us to either submit or die. I received an arrow through my shoulder, and then my leg for my stubbornness, and could no longer fight. Tanwyn, She tried to pull my broken arse back to safety, but one of the elves ran her through when her back was turned. The sound of combat died away, and for a few moments we just lay there on the ground, waiting for the end to come. My apologies, traveler. I need a moment, and a drink. Greetings to you. Yes. You'll have to forgive me. It seems retelling this was more difficult than I expected. It's been a long time. I could hear Tanwyn wheezing, a terrible, airy noise as she breathed through her wounds. The blood was pouring out of me just as fast. As for the Thalmor, they pulled back, but I could hear someone approaching. One of their commanders came into view. At first I thought he was going to finish us off, but he just stood there, his brow furrowed, staring down at us as if he'd never seen a person die before, as if we were objects for him to study. But in the end, there was nothing I could do. I used the last of my strength to pull myself over to where Tanwyn was lying. We'd come from the same village, fought for years at each other's side. She managed to squeeze my hand softly, just once, before I heard her breathe her last. Then darkness took me. Possibly. I suppose the hardest part is that I'll never know. She disappeared, never to be heard of again. Perhaps she did keep her word, almost killed herself. Maybe she thought we could deal with the larger force. Maybe the group we were to intercept had changed, or someone tipped them off we were in the area. Or maybe there was no Lavella Diantus. It was a Dominion ruse from the beginning. It doesn't matter anymore. What's done is done. I awoke to find myself chained to the back of a rusted cage. I was delirious, half dead really, and the agony of losing all of them had taken its toll. But still, somehow I clung to life. It was slow and painful. But as the Dominion crowed over their new prisoner, I began to recover. Eventually, I was handed over to a scouting band and taken to one of the camps. Your average prison is usually just an extension of the local fort or castle. A couple of cells chiseled out of the walls with some guards to patrol it. The Dominion, though, they built them to last. No doubt with magic at their aid. The camps were designed to be in the most hostile areas available, ensuring that if someone did manage to escape, they wouldn't make it on their own. I spent the first few months carefully examining the defenses. It'd be no easy task. Large, reinforced metal barriers, 3 rings deep, kept everyone locked tightly behind them. Spells or explosives would have barely made a dent. And the Justicars were everywhere, always watching. Some people would crack just under the stress. Then there were the beatings, torture, executions. The Dominion prides itself on being cultured and superior. But in reality, this is just a facade. They may be even more cruel than the Dwemer. Life in the camps wasn't so bad at first. They'd bring you just enough food to keep you alive. A mysterious slop that tastes like boiled leather. I was in a bunker with about 100 others. Mostly Red Guards, but there were some orcs as well. Even a Bosmer, though he didn't last long. As you slowly begin to waste away, the lethargy ensures that prisoners are docile. then, your biggest enemy is time. But every now and again, there needed to be a reminder of how things worked, the established order. It was a couple of weeks after I'd been captured before I saw this demonstrated. The Justicars came into each bunker in force and pulled us all out in the middle of the night. Some of us didn't even have time to dress, and the Alakir can be very cold at night.